as humans, we're eating multiple meals and multiple different food items to comprise our overall nutritional intake. Whereas for dogs and cats, we are creating it's in the name. It's supposed to be complete, right? We're giving them a complete diet, a complete ration in one. So sometimes hard to ensure that that all consumers are understanding that potential disconnect. And that's also why we take education as seriously as we possibly can from an internal and external standpoint.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Pet Food Science Podcast, where we seek to discuss current research and how it may apply to innovation in the pet food industry. I'm your host, Julia Pezzali, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. James Templeman and Lindsay Meyers about the science behind the benefits of raw pet food. Welcome, James and Lindsay, to our podcast.
Thank you, Julia.
Thanks, Julia.
And before we talk about raw pet food, which I'm sure you have a lot of experience and knowledge to share with us, do you mind introduce yourself to our audience, a little bit of your background and how you ended up in your current position today?
Yeah, so just like Julia said, I'm James. I'm the Director of Nutrition and Formulation here at Primal. I've been here for somewhere in the realm of 3 to 4 years, and I actually have a little bit of personal history with Julia. I did my grad school in the same lab, in the same office as she did. So we have a little bit of personal history to go back to our academic sides prior to what we're currently sitting in now. So
thanks, Julia. Again, I'm Lindsay Meyers. I've been working for Primal. It'll be 10 years this July. Big milestone. And I am currently our Vice President of Quality, Food Safety, Quality, and Compliance. And I oversee a few teams, including James's team that handles nutrition and formulation. I spent the early part of my career prior to coming to Primal in veterinary medicine, working as a certified veterinary technician. So that's me.
84 million times a day, pets eat meals with ingredients from Trow Nutrition. We bring together the science of ingredients, nutrition, and blending to unleash possibilities for pet food brands. Premixes are just the start. Turn to Trow for higher inclusion ingredients too, like proteins and carbohydrates, and highly sensitive ingredients like probiotics. With our palatants and base blends, you can feel confident about what comes in our bags and goes in yours. Learn more at TrowNutritionPets.com.
Awesome. Since we have a very complete team here, the nutritionist, food safety, all the experts that we need to talk about raw pet food. And just a basic question about nutrition, but I think it's really important for our listener to understand and to make sure that it's clear that raw diets can be complete and balanced, and any format can be. But specifically for raw diets, how do we ensure that a raw diet is complete and balanced for dogs and cats?
I think everybody goes about this a little bit differently. It's in the essence, it's a multifaceted approach. We definitely start out with a reliance on sophisticated software that allows us to kind of predict nutritional composition of different finished goods. I think that's a method that's used by most everybody in the industry at this point. That really helps us kind of gauge where we sit with theoretical compositions of our diets. But then at the end of the day, we also have to ensure that we're compliant to AAFCO recommendations for whatever species and life stage that we're creating a diet for, with finished good testing, and of course your raw material testing as well. I think it's always comes back to the garbage in, garbage out kind of analogy, right? Like your software and your outputs are only going to be as good as your inputs are going to be. So we put a lot of time and effort towards assessing our raw materials, whether that's working with suppliers and our procurement team on that side, and then of course doing all of our internal and external testing of our raw materials, because again, as complete of a raw material database as you can get, hopefully the more predictable your finished goods are going to be when you have those kind of theoretical software outputs. And then of course you're testing your finished goods to ensure you're maintaining that AAFCO compliance kind of periodically through your year and through different batch testings as well. But at the end of the day, I'm always going to be somebody that's pretty reliant on data. I think data is king in my world. So everything that you can do from a raw material standpoint to try and understand the variability that may exist in your raw materials. And I can say from firsthand experience, the raw materials that we work with in the space of raw and minimally processed pet foods can come with a lot of variability. You're using intact proteins and you're using intact bone-in proteins to supply some of your important micronutrients. So you have to have that expectation of variability and do your best from a testing standpoint to capture that as best you can. But then, like we all know in this space, the variability doesn't end with your raw materials. You have to have some understanding of laboratory variability, production and operational variability from your mixers and your grinders. So just doing all you can from a testing standpoint to make sure that you're minimizing that variability as it kind of extrapolates to your finished goods. And then I'll also just kind of add a last comment that it's a team effort. It starts maybe with me and some software formulations, but we really rely on everybody in the entire kind of chain of process and procedure to be really diligent when it comes to handling those, when it comes to procuring and purchasing those, having a lot of confidence in our suppliers. So everybody that's involved and touches something along the way is having a really important role in making sure our diets are complete and balanced. And it's great to have a nice team all the way through with a lot of confidence in our different team members to make sure that what we're making is healthy and safe and nutritious for dogs and cats.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that James's team does so much work on that variability and making sure that we can account for that variability. I think the thing that's more challenging when you think about why is it more challenging to formulate something for a raw food diet to be complete and balanced? I used to tell the reason I'm here working for Primal and not still in veterinary medicine is because I found some passion in the food helping one of my dogs years ago that had some health issues. And I didn't know, in the veterinary space, I didn't know much about raw food originally, right? I didn't realize that you could make it complete and balanced. And then when I started to dig in and I realized it's the same, right? You may have more variability in raw materials because of exactly what James said. If you're taking whole animal parts like a beef heart or lamb brisket bone or something like that, obviously the different quantities of fat in one individual animal versus another can vary. And so his team really works hard to account for that variability. And you can imagine, right, that if there's a supply chain challenge or if there's variability in one ingredient or another, they do a lot of work with our procurement and our quality and our continuous improvement engineering and R&D teams to make sure that we understand the variability of the individual raw materials, but then the variability of different mixing techniques. Like he was saying, there's so many different teams that can impact the nutrient compliance of foods that we all have to work together to make sure that we understand, are we mixing enough? Are we grinding to a small enough piece size? Are we taking the right composites for the lab? Is it representative? And, a lot goes into it. But we've learned, we've been at Primal, we've been doing it almost 25 years now. So we've gotten very good at cutting that variability down as much as is possible.
Yeah, and for someone who likes data like James, the variability, it's his enemy, I guess. But it's an important conversation because I think one of the appeals for pet owners about raw and gently cooked is because they look like what they eat, is they see, but then it's a challenge because they think they can make it at home very easily. But it's not just buying a raw meat or just cooking or rice and something and then understanding and sharing that is very challenging for any to make pet food, but raw specifically all the variability and the work and science behind raw material, it's something that really makes a difference in ensuring that diets are complete and balanced.
And it's definitely sometimes a challenging disconnect with consumers as well, because for exactly what you said, right, the meals maybe sometimes look exactly what they are eating every day, but it's hard to always provide the education necessary to understand that as humans, we're eating multiple meals and multiple different food items to comprise our overall nutritional intake, whereas for dogs and cats, we are creating it's in the name. It's supposed to be complete, right? We're giving them a complete diet, a complete ration in one. So sometimes hard to ensure that that all consumers are understanding that potential disconnect. And that's also why we take education as seriously as we possibly can from an internal and external standpoint, because again, what we do can sometimes be a little bit shrouded in mystery what happens behind the curtain and why, the meal that they have and the meal that their pets have look similar, but might function very differently in terms of meeting the entire nutritional needs or requirements of that animal. So.
And part of meeting those nutritional needs or recommendations, requirements is providing vitamins and minerals. There are some that dogs and cats, they cannot synthesize in their bodies, so we need to ensure we are providing the diet. And in the industry, there are some products that use synthetic vitamins, synthetic minerals, and some don't. Do you guys have experience with formulating products with not including synthetic vitamins and minerals, and maybe gonna share some challenges, or is it difficult or not, or experience regarding that synthetic vitamins?
I'll start with this one because it's pretty near and dear to my heart. So us at Primal, we've been doing this, like Lindsay said, for over 20 years, and we've been doing it for over 20 years without the use of synthetic vitamins and minerals. It's a pillar that we stand upon quite proudly at Primal, and it's also just something that our consumer base has this desire and expectation for. And I'll kind of talk about that a little bit in a minute or two here, but so yes, I'm going to say absolutely it is difficult, but I really don't want to glaze over the fact that balancing micronutrients is, I may be saying this from a personal opinion, but is very likely the hardest part of every formulator's job. Whether you're doing so with synthetic sources or with natural sources, I'm sure these are the pieces and parts of a complete and balanced diet that give formulators probably the most gray hair. And yes, is it maybe more challenging to do it the way that we do with natural ingredients? I'd say yes and no. There's always going to be challenges and some things that maybe are kind of a benefit to how we do. But, formulating with natural vitamins and minerals is always going to be a challenge for us, right? We are talking about variability that exists within our raw materials. We also have to have the expectation that variability is trickling down to those raw materials that are supplying, not our massive chunks of protein and essential amino acids, but these little slivers of different important micronutrients and trace minerals. So we also have to have that same expectation of variability that exists within our naturally sourced ingredients to provide these micros. And at the same time, it also gets very challenging. We've faced a lot of, the entire industry, the human food industry, we've all faced some pretty significant supply chain issues in recent years. And when you're using more unique raw materials that are natural sources of vitamins and minerals, we don't always have that redundant backup option that we have and that exists for so many of our other primary ingredients and that exists for many other, manufacturers within the industry. So we have to be really, really tight in our relationships with our suppliers. We have to have a lot of confidence in the supply chain and in the understanding that we can get what we need in quantities large enough to support what we manufacture. So I'm not saying that, again, the supply chain is not causing everybody challenges when it comes to micronutrient balance and composition, but we're in a little bit of a more unique place in that sense. And I know it causes us a lot of grief at times. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to the fact that this is what our consumers want and desire. And at times we also have to kind of reflect on that too and find that balance that strikes between what a consumer wants and what we as a manufacturer can confidently and consistently and safely make on a day-to-day basis. So it's a juggling or a balancing act, however you want to define it. But yeah, I'm not going to say that it's not probably the most challenging part of my job.
Yeah, James and his entire team really have some unique challenges. I think he quoted them pretty well, that there are a lot of challenges around procurement, right? Like making sure we have a strong supply chain of each of those, like a couple of the ingredients that we use for balance that are whole food sourced are only available from one place overseas. And so we have to plan way ahead to make sure that we have enough of those things. There are several that I can think of off the top of my head that are in that situation. And when we talk about variability, like if for example, if we're talking about kelp, like we get our kelp from one specific source, we've had data from them for many, many years. We know how much iodine there is in that kelp. And like if we lost that source of kelp, which comes from overseas, we would have to do James' team would have to do a lot of work to ensure that we weren't over or underdoing it on that nutrient, right? And I think that's just one tiny example of all of the, hundreds of nutrients that they're monitoring on a regular basis and all of these little raw materials. It makes it challenging, but the consumer demand piece, like that is one of those core Primal tenets that we're known for over 20 years, that we could make a complete and balanced and safe raw pet food diet using only real food. And that's what our customers want from us. And so that's what we provide. It's challenging, but it's absolutely doable as long as you have a great team like James's making sure that it works.
If with anybody with formulation experience, at least if it's maybe similar experience to mine, it's a part of my job that I very much enjoy. And if I do get an opportunity to kind of separate out all the rest of my work life and just have this piece that's formulation, from that perspective, it is almost kind of fun, right? Formulation's a puzzle, and it's, at least from my perspective, the more challenging the puzzle, the more satisfying the resolution, and the path along the way is always a little bit more interesting. So from a strictly, just sitting as a formulator, I can say that it does actually provide some fun challenges. But sometimes the rest of your work life makes that little sliver of formulation not quite the most fun piece of the puzzle. But I can still say that from a challenge perspective, it does. Yeah, bring some satisfaction to find that solution and that resolution.
Yeah, and I bet it is also challenging or interesting working with alternative ingredients, that your new ones that the consumer may be asking, or how do we incorporate that, how you balance to a new formula. And it's not as simple, and it takes months and maybe sometimes years to launch a complete and balanced product that are going to be safe and all those attributes that it's necessary. And we talk about the raw material and the formulation, but I know you guys also care a lot about what happens with the animal. And then to kind of evaluate that, there's some feeding studies that can be done. And I've been reading that Primal has been publishing some of the work that has been sponsored. Do you mind telling us a little bit the scientific research that Primal has sponsored of this past years? I mean,
this is, pretty much one of my favorite topics. I think anybody that has spoken to me in any way, shape, or form probably knows that my heart lies in academia and in research. Julia has firsthand knowledge of this. We worked a desk apart from each other for many years in a pretty high capacity lab at the University of Guelph. And as much as I might have left that desk and that office when I started here at Primal, my heart has continued to lie in research. So it was really encouraging for me when I came to Primal. It was one of the first things that I really had the confidence maybe to advocate for was for us to enter this realm of sponsored research, and not just for the sake of us as a company. I think a lot of people see this strictly from like a competitive advantage standpoint, but for me, that's definitely going to be a value add addition. But I think there's just so much important work that needs to be done in this industry with accessible and published research, getting a little bit out of that proprietary lane that keeps a lot of that out of the eyes of the consumer and other members in the industry. So I really wanted us to kind of, be a little bit at the forefront when it came to really showing what research can be done in this area of alternative or minimally processed pet foods, because we're lacking a little bit behind some of those conventional diets that have been studied now for decades of time, with all the different characteristics and aspects that go along the way. So it was really a big piece of why I just kind of had so much fun, especially in my first couple of years here. We started a research project with a research group out of the University of Illinois, led by Dr. Kelly Swanson and his PhD student, Elizabeth or Lizzie Geary. And they've just done a huge amount of hard work for us, right? Boots on the ground work. We know what the graduate students do, and it's at the heart of all the research. And it's been a really pretty wild ride for us in the last 3 going on 4 years now. So yeah, we carried out essentially about a 3-legged research project with this team starting in 2022, and it's really been a pretty wild adventure, and it's a partnership. I'm pretty excited to see where we can kind of take it in the coming years, and I can actually really excitedly say that not only out of those 3 projects have we had 3, I think maybe 4 presentations at different academic and industry conferences, places like the American Society of Animal Science, but they've also resulted in 3 now peer-reviewed publications in reputable journals like the Journal of Animal Science and Translational Animal Science. So, I can say definitely from back where we started, I didn't necessarily think it was going to shake out like this and lead to all these great things, but it's been a really fun project to be a part of, and it's kind of made me still feel like my heart's still in research, even though my body and mind are in, very solidly in industry. So it's just been a really, really fun last few years, and I'm excited to see what we can do more in sponsored research in the coming ones.
I'm just thrilled to have James. I remember during his interview talking about both of our passion for research and the importance of making sure that research is publicly available. I came from a different side of it on the veterinary side, just wanting to see published research and having that help with confidence in not just the company who's sponsoring the research, but what James was saying is like the more research that's out there and is publicly available especially when it comes to alternative and minimally processed foods, then the better we can all do, in creating and formulating and making sure these diets are safe and balanced. I'm really excited to keep moving with research, and I'm hopeful that we can start to do some research around some microbiological and like pathogen or viral research as well. We've been looking into that, and I hope that we can find some good opportunities in that area. Most of the research that James and I have helped with or sponsored directly has been related to nutrition and digestibility. But I'm looking forward to continuing that over the years and to keep pushing. So,
because I'll admit we get a lot of input from different organizations and groups of people, whether that's consumers, whether that's other people in the industry or the veterinary community. And a lot of time, I think the conversation about raw and minimally processed pet food oftentimes kind of slows or comes to a little bit of a halt when we get to some of the things that people maybe want to see from a research perspective, right? There's been so much anecdotal and observational evidence in the last 10 to 20 years since raw and minimally processed feeding started to become a little more mainstream. But what was always lacking was that that empirical evidence that's there, and it's readily accessible, and it's been through the rigors of peer-reviewed research. So that was a big driver behind us really wanting to carry this all the way through to the finish line, right? And now we're looking at other opportunities to again take this out of the strictly nutritional space and a little bit into more of the food safety space, which again there's even more asks of what we can do and what can be done from a research perspective there. So really just trying to again pull up the industry, pull up our category, and just show that manufacturers, not just us, but manufacturers everywhere of minimally processed pet foods can do it well from a nutritional perspective. And now hopefully we can show they can do it very well from a food safety perspective as well.
Yeah, and I was at the IFA meeting in January. I saw some research that the student presented from Primal about the different processing techniques, how affects amino acid digestibility. So very good research that kind of research helps the entire industry. It's just really our knowledge about different processing techniques, and it's not a commercial formulas like a basal formula that really helps, again, drive the industry forward as a whole. So
was that the new research, James?
Yeah, that was what Lizzie presented at AFIA in January.
That's some really exciting stuff. I'm glad you got the opportunity to see that, Julia.
Yeah, no, it was really good. It's really good. And she did a great job. She did a great job presenting that as well.
Yeah, she's a great presenter. She's done a ton of work for us, and she's a lot of fun to interact with. I was just emailing her yesterday about some of that prelim data. So very fun for me to be able to see. And it's, the highlights of my day sometimes are seeing some of the data sets that she's sending.
Yeah, I bet.
On that as well?
That is the project that she's in collaboration with as well, yeah.
And sometimes research is that there's a basic research about mechanism that's going to help in 10, 20 years maybe, but it's going to be one that may solve that problem that nobody can figure out. But there is one the consumer wants to know, and then there is one that what is the current industry challenge that we need to solve. So there is like these three always like puzzles that is sometimes they go to different directions, but which one should we target, which one is important to ensure safety and to nutrition. So. But great job that those data are being published and everyone can have access to that, again, to help the industry as a whole. But based on the research, James and Lindsay, that you talk about that you have been doing with the University of Illinois, do you want to share some highlights of what are some potential benefits of feeding an alternative minimally processed pet food format, such as freeze-dried, maybe?
I won't get too into the weeds here because I could be here a while. There's a lot of data presented over those three studies, but in terms of some kind of more noteworthy findings directly associated with minimally processed, so our frozen raw, the freeze dried raws, those kind of diets. The scope of these 3 studies was really to dive into the digestibility kind of web and start more specific. So we did look at some more specific amino acid digestibility data and then expanded that out into kind of whole diet, more apparent total tract digestibility work with a dog cohort at the end. And what we found was nice in the sense that it did support some notions that had been, out there in the ethos in an observational and anecdotal sense for quite a while, was that, we saw some improved standardized digestibility of a selection of different amino acids, both essential and or indispensable and dispensable, which was nice to see. And then when that was expanded more broadly again to looking at whole diet or apparent total tract digestibility, we're seeing similar trends to what we've seen in a little bit of previous literature and what's been, again, noted anecdotally for quite a few years, which was really seeing nice improved digestibility coefficients for things like dry matter, organic matter, protein, fat, and overall energy. And then seeing some of these digestibility improvements again, empirically supported with things like, reduction in fecal output and changes in fecal quality as well. So nice to kind of, again, build that puzzle for consumers, things that they may recognize on a day-to-day basis, but don't have a sense or an idea of how to actually put that together with a little bit of empirical support. So it's been nice. We've also done quite a lot of microbiota work as well. That I really can't get too deep into just because of the amount of differences that were identified. But, we're seeing tons of shifts in abundance of different fecal microbiota populations. And for the most part, really following similar trends of what we've seen in previous literature, really based on the basic macronutrient composition of these different diet formats. So, trends in abundance with diets that are maybe higher in that carbohydrate content with some of our, more conventional extruded diets, and then shifts in abundance of populations that are maybe a little more driven towards those high fat, high protein diets that you'd see more conventionally with like our minimally processed, our raw frozen, our freeze dried, our raw freeze dried as well. So really, really, really kind of interesting data to see, and really just kind of so much data that it also made us stop and look at exactly what you mentioned earlier, Julia, was that, okay, we're doing all of this research with commercially available diet formats when you don't always have that control over aspects like ingredient profiles, macronutrient compositions, and things like that. So this really was the goal of our next research project, was to try and tease apart all of those potentially affecting factors and really look at if we can just kind of dial it directly into process. And so again, you mentioned you'd seen that little excerpt from Lizzie Geary at AFIA, and that was really just that kind of first taste of what's to come as we really tried to do our best to look into strictly the effects of processing when it comes to some of these very similar outcomes: amino acid digestibility, whole diet digestibility, and effects in the gut microbiome. So really excited to see where that data takes us, and I'm just thrilled that it was presented and taken with such really great feedback from AFIA. And I know Lizzie's going to have some really cool publications coming out in this next year here, as she looks to wind up her PhD as well. So keep your eyes peeled for some more Primal sponsored and University of Illinois kind of driven research.
James could talk about that stuff forever. The only tiny thing I want to add is that I think one of the things that was the most exciting for me when we've learned so much in the last few years in doing this, and have really started to pull the research into that direction that James mentioned. But the first study that we did, we were comparing ourselves to ourselves. So our customers, we, in the last 20 years, we started as a frozen raw pet food company, and then, dove into freeze dried. And then, in the last couple of years, we've dove into some other alternative formats. And that first comparison, we were just looking to show ourselves and our consumers and our customers what we could anecdotally see to be true, which was that no matter if we were freezing it, freeze drying it, or applying any of these new formulations or technologies, that we were getting that same high digestibility that was one of the major reasons that people came to us for these diets in the first place. If you ask anyone who's a raw feeder, many of them will tell you that first thing that they notice is less litter, or less poops in the litter box or less poop to pick up in the backyard. And it was really awesome. That first study, we got the data pretty quickly that showed how close it was, no matter what we were using for that processing technique or what those additional ingredients or tweaks were. Those diets were almost identical in their digestibility, which was really nice for us to see. Our big mission, right, is to get more people feeding at least some minimally processed food. And for a lot of people, it's about convenience. Thawing frozen food is not for everyone. And so it was really nice to see that those alternative products could be just as effective for people and their pets and more convenient. So it was a lot of fun. And then as we kept going, this new one that's coming out where James and worked with those teams to standardize a recipe so that we could literally just look at the difference in processing. I think that one will be a really fun addition to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, and talk about fun and addition, and maybe Lindsay and James, they're gonna share what is your favorite product or recipe that you worked on over the years at Primal.
I'll personally say that it's been our kibble in the raw. We launched our kibble in the raw innovation for dogs last year, and coming soon we have some offerings there finally for some of our feline friends, which has been something that's been near and dear to my heart as somebody who is sitting here with 3 cats all around him. But I'm going to say this one stands out personally to me because this was such a long process. This was 4+ years of just from thought inception to us finally getting something, not just being produced in our facilities, but also seeing packaging and these kind of things, the pieces of the process that finally make it feel real. I'll say there was definitely times during those 4 years where I didn't think it was ever going to be real. I think we can all look back and feel very similar about that. But I can also kind of say with full sincerity that what we ended up with, at least in my mind, and I'm sure if you ask almost anybody else that had a hand in this very long and arduous process, was even better than what we could have imagined in the first place. And I'll also say that my criteria of a successful product isn't necessarily dollars and cents as much as our CFO Guy is probably frowning at me as I say that. But for me, success of a product is really based on how the consumer reacts, and then obviously more importantly how it performs when it's actually consumed at home by everybody's dogs and cats. And this was also a big push of our research, was trying to understand more about this innovative product as we were in the process of developing and launching it. So really just seeing the combined feedback from consumers upon launch, and then that in combination with some of this great data that we were getting back on some of our dog studies at the same time, it just really it just cemented into me that like this 4 years, all this time and effort was truly worth it. And again, not from my perspective from a dollars and cents, but just really like how well this product is done and how much our consumers have appreciated having an option that's available to them that brings some of these benefits of raw and minimally processed pet food, but comes with that convenience and that, that hit to the wallet that's maybe a little more of what they were used to with a more conventional diet that they were on previously. So in my perspective, it's that one without question.
Yeah, I don't know how I could answer differently. I have been raw feeding my dogs. I have 3 dogs. 2 of them are sitting behind me right now. And I've been raw feeding my dogs since way before I started working here at Primal. And I am feeding kibble. I still feed some frozen raw too, but I'm feeding the kibble in the raw. It is incredible. It was so fun to work on. And I think the part I'm most proud of is how many new consumers to the category we've been able to pull in with this product line. And I'm just so thrilled that we were able to take the time to do the research like early on, like way pre-launch, to make sure that what we were doing and how we were innovating was still meeting those expectations that we had for ourselves. Like, that the expectations that James had for the product and that, I had, and that our sales and customer service teams had, to make sure they could just say that we were still us, like that we were making something that was a shelf stable kibble, scoop and serve format, but that was still holding true to those tenets that we believe in. And, making those diets complete and balanced with no synthetics was a huge challenge for James and I. And we worked really hard on it, and it was a ton of fun. And I can't wait for the feline. It's coming very soon. People started asking about the cat version literally
within days.
We were like, hold on. So it's been fun.
Well, my cat's looking forward to that. And when you launch that, please send some samples for him to test, and I'll make sure to
Yeah, of course.
post his reaction on my LinkedIn and social media to see if he approves or not.
We'll make sure a bag falls off the truck somewhere in Kansas for
Well,
you
if
there.
it has sorghum, it has to, come here because,
Yeah,
Exactly,
that's
right? This is completely an ode to KSU here and that research. So yeah, absolutely.
It's time for our famous 3. A longer, healthier lifespan for our pets. That is EW Nutrition's target. With immunoglobulins, that target is within reach. IGY are a young generation technology platform, an innovative solution that has been tried and tested over the last decades and can now yield tangible benefits. Immunoglobulins from egg yolk improve the animal's response to pathogens in the gut or in the mouth. They're easy to administer, they're perfectly safe, and they just work. Made with passion, proven with science.
Well, thank you very much, Lindsay and James, for joining us today. I had a lot of fun talking with you both, and also learn a lot about the challenges and all the hard work you do to make sure those products are safe and complete and balanced for dogs and cats. But before I let you go, I have 2 questions not directly related to raw dog and cat food. The first one is I love meat. I don't know, for those who don't know me, I think you both like to eat some steaks too, but because we're talking about raw diets which are meat based, and which is your favorite cut of meat to grill on the weekend or on a weekday?
I mean, I'll say that it's not even grill. My wife got me a smoker a couple years ago, and I've been using this quite religiously in the last few. So I'll say, without question, it's probably throwing a rack of ribs on the smoker. That's my forte, and I'd say it happens probably every maybe week to 2 weeks here. So yeah, it's definitely near and dear to my heart.
I am a New Englander, and so if I have to stick to like land mammals to give you my cut of meat answer, I will say it's definitely like a really good bone-in steak. But I am definitely a seafood person.
Okay.
She's from New Hampshire. She can't not be seafood.
Yeah, but if I have the choice, I will crush raw oysters. It's definitely my favorite protein.
Oh, I'll definitely not eat that in Kansas. No.
Don't eat it in Kansas.
Yeah, in Kansas, I wouldn't maybe trust that. Yeah.
I hope you'd say some Brazilian meat, James. You went there. We have the best barbecue and meat.
Can I just say I'll just stick with my cachaça as my
it's my drink. That works.
My drink to go along with it. So there, I'll get a little love for both sides.
There you go. And last question, James, you joined the industry a few years ago. Lindsay, you have been in the industry a little bit longer. Do you have any advice of new talent that are joining the industry out of bachelor's or graduate school? Any suggestion, advice that they can take on?
I'll say, again, it's been a much more recent departure for me. And to be honest, I'm still learning things every single day. I mean, I think we all should still be learning things every single day, but I think I'm still learning things about how to operate in the industry. But my biggest thing, and what I tell to a lot of new grads in particular, and it's honestly something I still struggle with, but it's to embrace imposter syndrome. This is something I tell to a lot of people because I still struggle feeling like I'm an imposter in a lot of the situations that I'm put in. But I also have to know and trust that the people that are putting me there, and myself, if I'm putting me there, I'm there because people believe that I can do the task at hand, and they believe that I have the skills necessary to do so. And I think it's taken a lot of effort upon of myself to also believe that I belong there and I have the talent and expertise. And also, if I don't always have the talent or expertise, then I'm surrounded by a really talented team of people that, this is a group project, right? I tell that to graduate students all the time. You're never getting away from group work. So believe and rely on yourself, but at the same time, just believe and rely on your teammates as well, because we're not in this on our own. We're in this as a huge team of people that operate together every single day to make a successful product. So those would be my kind of two biggest pieces of advice that I still try to give myself, on a weekly basis for the most part.
I guess I'm just going to say, add to that, because that's a really good one. I think confidence is important. Like, there's room for everyone in this space. The pet industry is huge and there are so many different parts of it. Like, if you feel like, maybe the time you've spent in academia or in research or finishing your degree has been like really focused on one specific topic, as it sort of has to be, like, just remember that doesn't mean that a company who is not focused on that one research topic isn't going to want someone who's confident and curious. Like, a scientist is a scientist, and that stuff can be applied everywhere. Sort of like what James was talking about, like the difference between formulating a traditional diet and a raw diet is not very dissimilar. And I think, those things can translate. And as long as you're curious and ask questions, like, there's no silly question. I feel like if you come into a new format or a new type of company or a new thing, whether it's treats or chews or balanced foods, like, I think there's just so much to offer each other, and collaborating too. Like, I can't think of like more fun spaces to do that than like all the opportunities we've had to meet with you in the past, Julia. Like, there's Pet Food Forum, there's KibbleCon, there's all of these different places where you can get together with industry and really understand what's out there, and just have fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Lindsay and James. I really enjoyed having you both here. I hope you'll come back in a couple of weeks to another podcast to discuss maybe the future research that has not been published. We just saw some details. But yeah, thank you very much, and hoping to have you both back here.
Thanks.
Of course. Yeah, thank you, Julie. Appreciate having us there.